From 1914 to 1918, the world was consumed by a war at a scale like no other, with more than 100 nations worldwide eventually becoming involved. Australia was one of these nations, and, being part of the Commonwealth, it had a duty to reinforce Great Britain's army. But war wasn't just going on elsewhere. In Australia, tensions were high too, and these tensions revolved around enlistment and conscription. This video will examine the different reactions to the war, opposition to conscription, and various other topics which will help deduce whether enlisting to serve in World War I was an easy choice for Australian men to make. On balance, the evidence suggests that enlisting was not an easy choice due to the two very contrasting arguments which would have been prominent throughout the war. However, as the war progressed, the decision to enlist would have become less appealing. When war first broke out, Australian men were eager to participate, with many trying to enlist before it was even possible. Over the next 2 years, however, the view towards war began to become less unanimous, and opposition to enlistment started gaining a powerful voice. At the start of the war, Australia had such an overflow of men recruiting that they had to turn people away. After the news of casualties started being reported, these numbers dropped, and by 1916 there was a shortage of volunteers to enlist. When the government began campaigning for conscription, the dynamics changed drastically. Many men were pressured to join by family and friends, and it was thought of as the honourable thing to do. One source shows the impact of family views on men's decisions to enlist. This source is an image created by the New South Wales Recruiting Committee and gives insight into how men valued the opinions of their family and friends. The obvious difference in colour between the two sections of the poster give insight into how the message was intended to be received. By making the upper picture brighter and more appealing and the lower image darker and bleak, the idea that serving is noble and more appealing is expressed. Requiring more soldiers, Prime Minister Billy Hughes pushed for conscription twice, once in 1916 and again in 1917. In this period, the government put large amounts of effort and funding into influencing the public to vote yes. A lot of the posters put up were centered on shaming those who voted no. One particular example is the Anti's Creed. Looking at some of the lines, it could be inferred by an individual reading the poster that those who opposed conscription were traitors and supporters of the enemy. This writing has a condescending tone, which seems like it is scorning the reader and evoking feelings of shame and guilt from those intending to vote against conscription. Whilst there was a large amount of peer pressure for men to enlist, there was also equal pressure not to. The main opposers of conscription were feminist groups such as the Women's Peace Army, labour union groups such as Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, and even some returned soldiers. Many in these groups argued that war was inhumane or that Australia did not have an obligation to assist the Allies. Anti-conscriptionists also released their own media to combat the government's material. One such piece of media is the poster The Blood Vote, which has been referred to as the single most influential piece of campaign material produced by the anti-conscription campaign. This poster is an example of how women influence men's decisions to enlist. Similar to the Anti's Creed, The Blood Vote has an accusatory tone, but focuses on women and their identity as mothers. This poem likens mothers voting yes to directly killing their own children and uses the pen as a metaphor for a dagger. This piece of anti-conscription media gives a good idea of what the opposition to the war was like and how they structured their arguments. Both sides of the debate placed a strong emphasis on family and loyalty when trying to persuade members of the public, and this can be seen as reflective of the times. After analysing both sides of the argument, it can be determined that, most likely, enlisting was not an easy choice for men in World War I. This can be attributed to the large amount of debate and mixed information from both sides of the argument. There would have been family pressure, peer pressure, and government pressure. However, as the war progressed and the information of casualties came to light, it is obvious that whatever original excitement there had been around war was beginning to waver. Due to these highly polarizing views for and against the war, it can be inferred that enlisting was not an easy choice for men either way.